William Flo, can you hear us okay?
Yes, I can hear you.
Keep
Closing you.
Yeah, Flo, can you hear us okay?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
No, I've got this started, thank you. Please come back to the structure.
Okay, welcome to the Hybrid Policy and Results Committee meeting 28 September 2022. To ask that any members or officers in physical attendance with an electronic device to mute it to avoid feedback. To ask that any remote participants keep their camera and microphone off unless they wish to speak, and ideally not use the camera facility at all, as this can affect the quality of the meeting. Please be advised that this meeting is going to be recorded, I think. Yes. And data collected during the recording of the meeting will be retained in accordance with the Council's data retention policy. The recording of the meeting may be added to the Council's website. Any members accessing the meeting remotely should be using your Smile or KCC laptop to participate virtually. Welcome everybody to this meeting, including any visiting members attending remotely. I won't be able to see you, and members of the public. I'd like to advise that the following staff are in attendance, either here today or remotely. So we have the Chief Executive, Lewis Reed. We have the Director of Resources, Lisa Fillery. We have Democratic Services, Philippa Davies. And we have the Interim Head of Audit, Alison Blake. Online, or whatever we call it, remotely, we have Duncan Ellis, who's Finance, and the Interim Head of Planning, Flo Churchill, and from Democratic Services we have Billy Attaway. I will now outline the emergency evacuation procedure. As some of us aren't familiar with this room, one might not be in here a while and might not know how to get out, I will advise the fire alarm is a continuous loud ringing. Exit routes are located. Well, it's not right, is it? But exit routes are located on each side of the room. Yeah. Do not try and exit that side. Exit over here. Leave the building via the nearest safe exit. And gather at the assembly point. Do not use the lift. Gather at the assembly point on the far side of the car park. Do not leave the assembly point or re-enter the building until advised to do so. Do not use the lifts. Is anyone able to use the stairs? Unable to use the stairs? Okay, thank you. Are there any apologies for absence and any confirmation of substitutes?
No, there were no apologies, Stephen.
Okay, I ask agenda item 3. Does anybody have any declarations of interest? Councillor Bonny.
On item 6, my parish council responded until public consultation, but I decided that is a disposal of non-pecuniary interest.
Okay, anybody else? I see no hands. In that case, agenda item 4, the minutes of the Policy and Resources Committee meeting that was held on the 13th of July. Are members happy that these are an accurate record?
Yes.
Thank you. Agenda item 5 is the miscellaneous constitution update. I'll hand over to Larissa on this one.
Okay, thank you, members. This, when we rewrote the constitution in order to start the committee system, we agreed with the constitutional working group that we would largely keep things that didn't need to be changed the same. What has happened as a result of that are, as we knew it would, we have minor changes and minor updates which are required, and these are set out in this report. I can go through them, however, I would suggest that if anyone has any question on any particular one, I can provide more information on that. They are all minor changes, there are no significant changes within this.
Councillor Henderson.
Propose we refer these to full council.
I'm happy to second that, Chair.
On maths? All happy with that?
Like to speak?
Oh, yes.
I just got a question on 317 actually, because looking at the Constitution, well, the one I was sent most recently, 28726 actually deals with council tax. So I'm a bit confused about that, and also that particular paragraph and recommendation. I would have thought that it would be most appropriate every year that the way the capital programme is going to be funded comes to P&R, or forms part of the budget within the full council, and rather than simply a delegated decision by an officer to do it. I mean, surely we have to have some member oversight about the capital programme and where the money is coming from to pay for it, taking into account lots of recommendations. That's the way I would prefer to see that. And also, it's probably a question from Mr. Physically about 28726. I don't know where this particular paragraph 317 actually refers to in the Constitution.
Lisa.
Yeah, certainly. So I've requested this recommendation, this delegation, because obviously when the capital programmes are put together, we have a funding schedule, otherwise we wouldn't have a source of funding for it. But during the year, sometimes we are allocated grants from central government or underspends within the revenue budget that would best, in my professional opinion, better fund the capital programme. It is a delegation that I have used to working within, and at the year-end position, it has been my role previously to assess the best position for the council with the funding that we've got, making the most of external funding where at all possible. If I have to bring that back every time I need a decision, it becomes unworkable. So it's obviously the parameters of the capital programme and the spend profiles are agreed by P&R and full council as part of the whole budget process. But once the spend has been agreed, I think it is most prudent and efficient for me to be able to assess the best funding route if the position changes during the year.
Yeah, I'm really obliged, Chairman. Thank Lisa for that. I think if the suggestion under 317 had talked about in-year changes and not a programme each year, which suggests that it's an annual programme, which we agree once, but the way it's being described would make sense. We're talking about in-year changes.
But yeah, we're talking about the capital programme as a whole. Yeah, it's
Can I just make sure that make it clear at this point? Please go through the chair, otherwise we just get out of chaos. Lisa.
Thank you. Yeah, so it's the year-end position. I'm not proposing that we change how we operate the capital programme setting during the year, and if we get significant funding during the year that warrant new spend, that obviously has to come through P&R because it's not part of the capital programme and there be the budget framework. But the funding mechanism at year-end, if I've got the freedom to be able to do the best possible position for the council, then it just makes things so much easier and efficient.
Anybody else?
My second question, sorry, was
The answer to the second question is a typo. The bit that I'm not able to answer is what the numbers are supposed to be, but I will endeavour to, it is that section, the numbers are, there's a typo, I will find the numbers and correct them before it goes to full council with your previous chair.
Shall we say as under number 7 as corrected?
Yes.
Thank you.
Well spotted, councillor Whiting. Anybody else? Okay, then I'll be happy to accept the recommendations on mass proposed by councillor Henderson and seconded by councillor Hall. No, councillor Hall. Agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Agenda item 6 is the Sittingbourne Town Centre supplementary planning document. And I think it's a really excellent piece of work. I think Alison has done a marvellous job. And Flo will now introduce this piece.
Thank you. Thank you. So, members, as I hope you're all aware, work on this Sittingbourne Town Centre SPD has been ongoing since 2020 and is now in the final stages of consultation. We carried out consultation for 6 weeks during February and March of this year. That consultation was comprehensive, as well as letters and emails to the statutory consultees. Targeted letters went out to around 800 or so businesses and residents in and around the town centre. There was also an online questionnaire that was available in paper copy form at libraries in and local to Sittingbourne, as well as the Forum and Swallows Leisure Centre. An exhibition explaining the content of the SPD took place at those locations. A press briefing also took place with local journalists and press, as well as social media campaign and letter drops. We received a total of 24 consultee responses. A summary of those responses is contained in Appendix 1 of the report before you. These responses covered 7 topic areas, as well as some more general comments. As a result of the consultation responses, some suggested amendments are proposed as per the report, with some further minor changes, including corrections of typos and some updated photographs, as tabled following the meeting of the Planning and Transportation Policy Working Group last week. The recommendations of the report, therefore, are to approve the revisions to the SPD due to feedback from the consultation and proposing adoption to full council. Thank you.
Thank you, Flo. So you've heard that. You've heard some of the comments that were made at the previous meeting regarding some of the pictures that have been taken on board and will be changed. Bearing that in mind, I'm happy to propose the 2 recommendations. We approve the revisions due to feedback from the consultation, and that we propose adoption to the full council. Any questions?
Just a correction rather than disturbed, if I may. Page 22, lodging for town council.
Granger.
Sorry, Mike, trying to get it
Sorry to interrupt, Parish. Councillor Whiting?
Thanks, Chairman. And just for you, the report talks about alternative options considered. I just wondered who had considered those options. There's no detail in the report about those options and who had considered them.
Flo, would you like to give an outline of the alternative options and how you considered and rejected them?
The alternative options that would have been considered, Chair, would have been not to have an SPD. And given the long programme of work and the consultation with members that have been carried out in advance of this SPD, it was considered that wasn't an appropriate option to take. The SPD will help us deal with planning applications in the town centre in an appropriate way. The purpose of SPDs is to help us implement local plan policies, and this will help us.
Larissa, sorry.
Just for members' benefit, I've had this before, and I think it might be worth an explanation. When it says the options that are considered and rejected, they are considered and rejected by the author of the report. So, as the author of the report, what we say is, this is what our recommendation is, this is what we've considered, this is what we've rejected, and this is the reason we've rejected it. That does not mean that members of the committee are not able to say, well, actually, we'd like to put an amendment in to say that you don't have an SPD or whatever, but it is the officer who writes the report who considers and rejects, because it is the officer's report. So just to be clear, some people think, oh, has it been rejected by SMT when it went there, or did it go to the chair of the committee who has rejected it? It is the officer who writes the report who considers and rejects in terms of.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Trudeau.
So, thanks, Chair. I don't think we should shuffle through this without acknowledging that it is a very considerable piece of work, and that's due to some members, but it's also due particularly to Alison Peters. And, you know, I can remember there was a lot of thought, a lot of time was given to this. And I think it comes out very clearly as a very balanced report. There's a proper balance between new housing and commercial, between retail and food and beverage. There's the strong emphasis on heritage. There's strong emphasis on design and so on, and quality and appearance, and you know, the built environment around an important town centre. So I think that's very good. The only thing I want to say is I've always been really excited and enthused about the idea that we might make St Michael's Road look something better than it does now. It's, until we do that, Sittingbourne's still going to look half finished. And, you know, obviously a lot depends on developers coming forward to the potential land costs, but if we can do that, and the idea of it being an avenue, I think we're right in the centre, you know, joining the high street to the north side of the town. I think that is a really important part, and you know, I hope that, you know, we do everything to actually make that reality rather than a dream. But just to reiterate, I think members and the officers have done a great job here.
Councillor Dendell.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I totally agree. It's a fantastic report. I have got a couple of questions though, and some of them are old chestnuts. You might recognise them. I'll start with footbridge first. Yes, with all the development going on the Eurolink Way, we desperately need a way across the railway to both the town and the station. But the report makes it quite clear that it's in the gift of the network.
Sorry, I missed that last bit, Councillor Dendell.
But sorry?
I missed that last one you said.
It's in the gift to Network Rail.
Oh, right.
But anything we can do to persuade them to go ahead with that, I think we must do. We need that link over to the station and to the town from the northern side. Desperately need.
Yes.
The second one, I'm picking up a couple of phrases here, and again, I think this is an old chestnut. The council purchasing leases, then renting back. I've never quite understood that one. Are we saying the council purchase leases at a certain price A, and rents back at a certain price B? So in effect, is subsidising the use of the empty shops. And that's just a question you don't need to be answered now, but I think it's something that's clear. And the third one, a phrase in there, a proposed community quarter in Central Avenue, which doesn't go into any detail, and that is an old chestnut, as you'll be aware, Jim. And I wonder if that can be padded out a bit more. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Foley, I think you've probably got some update on the rail, so
Yeah.
I'll take you and
Yeah.
then come back to the question.
Right, okay, yes. So I actually attended a stakeholder briefing with Network Rail on Monday, and they are in the process, they're about to shortly publish their 30-year plan. So the bridge that links, that goes over the railway line from Eurolink Way to Swell House, after a lot of discussion in the past, saying, can't we do something about that? They have looked at it in detail. they've drawn up some designs and they've taken a price, so they have got a price. Now, they're going to put it in their 30-year plan, which is good news. They haven't got the money to do it, but I think if we include it at this stage, I think it'd be really helpful, because going forward, if there are any pots of money for infrastructure, we can work with Network Rail to try and access those, because they recognise that their bridge is the pinch point and has a negative impact on our town centre. So that is really good news. So what I was going to suggest, if you can hear me Flo, is on page 78 we've got gateways, hubs and landmarks. And I think on the lower map there, it's quite rightly, we've got some blue dotted circle with enhanced gateways. We've got existing gateways and existing hubs. We need to make sure that where that bridge is, the railway line is there, and that bridge, I think the outline for the blue area needs to include, we need to include that within our area, is that railway bridge, especially if we're going to try and get some funding at some point in the future, and that's not immediate. And also, I think when we talk about, there's the East Street, Bell Lane, Crown Key Lane, somewhere that is suitably worded that there could be an upgrade, and they've looked at it to have traffic in both directions and a pavement on either side. Now, obviously, there's lots to do there. Yeah. So this is a major piece of infrastructure, but they understand its significance. So I think we need to be mindful of that, and I know that Kieran has hopefully been in contact with the relevant officer to give them that information. But I'd like to make sure that we cover that in this document, so there is scope in the future, because I don't see we'll be immediately reviewing it once it's in place.
Okay, Flo, are we able to make such significant changes at this stage of the document?
I'm not sure, and that my concern would be, if it were to be considered a significant major change, that we hadn't consulted on it.
Sorry.
Whoa.
Sorry.
Carry on, Flo.
So I think what I would like to do is just have a word with Alison, who is the substantial author of this work, and just check with her. But I can't imagine it would be a big problem. The only thing we need to be careful about is the SPD cannot set policy for the authority. It can only sort of expand on policy that we've already got. So we'd need to find a hook to tie that into in our existing policy.
Flo?
Yeah.
Whilst you're on, can you also answer the rent to lease question?
I don't know the answer to that, because I have to say my initial reaction would be rent lease to rent would be a way of us making money, not subsidising. So I would need to check to see which way round we were anticipating it would work.
Councillor Bonney.
Yes, so on page 25 of the report, Network Rail gives some very specific wording there. So they've already fed back, and they talk about the Crown Key Lane Bridge and Milton Road, and it's saying that it's a barrier. So that as part of the consultation process, they've indeed fed that back. They've now got further down the line in their thinking and saying that they're going to include it in their 30th plan.
So Flo, what are you recommending we do then? But we have to have a decision here if we're going to take it to full council or not. We could make a decision to take it to full council with the possibility of further advisory comments from the author.
Yes.
Can we get it on that plan?
After Wilson.
So the lease to rent, there are a number of reasons why lease to rent are used. So often it's used for regeneration, where you potentially have an area that you're not being able to let units, and maybe a small business that does not want to lease for a long period. The council leases and they can rent, and it doesn't have to be a subsidised rent, but they can rent for a shorter period. So it encourages, and they can also have a plan of who they like to encourage more businesses to come in, and the council can use it because of their leasing power, because people know that we're kind of good for it. They lease will tell me if we can't afford it. What it does enable us to do. So there is some really, if you look at Ashford, they've done lease to rent there, where they've had they've leased a unit, and they've had 3 or 4 small micro businesses go into that unit, all on individual small rents. Now that wouldn't happen with the lease, because the lease lessee wants a business who is prepared to sign up for 5 years or whatever, and it enables that, and it is a way of regenerating the town. It doesn't mean necessarily that there will be subsidies, but even where we lease, if we give rent for a period, that is in effect a subsidy. So you can do that for a short period, but a business case would be brought forward.
If I could just come back quickly on that, Chair. Yes, my concern was that you're subsidising an individual renter. That's not what I'm getting at. It's occupancy. So you take out a lease for a year or 2 years or whatever, but your occupancy is only 25%. So in fact, 75% of the time, we are paying for an empty shop.
So
and empty premises, that's my concern, it's the occupancy.
So yes, it is a valid concern. We would do it as part of a wider regeneration, where we would know that we would choose the leases in a place where we think we would get footfall, etc. It forms part of, as this whole does, a regeneration. But what you find with smaller businesses and micro businesses are they not prepared to take out a 5-year lease, or lessees aren't prepared to bet on them, where we are in a position that we are more able to do that.
Thank you. Community quarter, Chair?
Yes. You want to answer that community quarter? It's not, as it's another chestnut about the idea that we have a community centre in Central Avenue, and could it be padded out? Flo, are you able to answer on that one?
Again, we can make. I mean, you could propose some minor amendments, but whether you'd want, as a committee, whether you'd want to see those before they went to full council, or whether you've delegated responsibility to the head of planning in combination with yourself as leader or somebody to make those amendments on behalf.
Yeah, it was word proposed that threw me. I mean, it's been an old chestnut and been talked about for many years. It was saying it's now proposed again.
Okay.
The library, stroke Phoenix, stroke community centre.
You want to give us a page reference so people know which page you're talking about?
23.
Huh?
23.
23.
So, at the top, mixed use. Mixed use, there's new support for the new mixed-use development.
Page 23 says objectives for culture, F&B
I think this is on the report.
and leisure. It's page 65 in the large numbers. No?
Page 23.
23, they're the large. That's not changing the report, is it?
Sorry, the large numbers, Chair.
Page 23 or page
It's actually not a summary, it's a summary of the figures.
Well, we really need to suggest if you want to. Come on, bit quiet, please. Okay. If you want to suggest changes, it's got to be to the actual document itself, not to be supplementary update. And the objectives for culture, F&B and leisure are on page 23 of the main report. That's the area you're looking at. These are the areas, this is the document we would actually need to propose any changes to the amendment or amendments.
It would be under page 69, objectives of community infrastructure.
69.
Central Avenue.
Page 59, parking and.
69.
69.
Oh, 66.
The existing functions are according to town council centre. The aim is to retain the community functions. Land on Central Avenue is underutilised in terms of single-storey buildings, car parks, unused land and vacancy. This is an opportunity to create a cohesive and higher density community quarter with a mix of existing and new uses, community, residential, culture, public space, and possibly education in the form of college of further education.
Sounds fine.
What was that you're proposing to change?
Yeah, sorry, my apologies. I picked up the word proposal from the summary rather than the main report. So I'm happy with the wording.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hawking.
Just a bit of clarification if I can, because I think I'm in total agreement with what Councillor Bonnie said, Chairman. I just wanted to be totally sure about the map she was talking about and the lines, because as I see it in the report, it talks about where I want to provide better access under, and you referred to that, Councillor Bonnie, and better access over with a new bridge. And I just, those aspirations of Network Rail and things that we would agree with, which are in the report, don't seem to be indicated in any of the diagrams that we've been given, and it would be, I would have thought, helpful to do that. And if that's what Councillor Bonnie was suggesting, I think we've already consulted on that. It's already in the report. It's just not clearly marked on
page 78.
On page 78, big page 78, and the comments at the bottom of big page 79.
Okay, did you get that flow? Ron, you can always play the
Yes. Yeah. Chair, if I may, the one thing I would always say is when it comes to policy documents like this supplementary planning document we're talking about here, the written word always takes precedence over any diagrams or maps. But we can make some amendments to the diagrams to reflect the concerns that have been expressed.
And the wording, most importantly.
Yeah.
So the recommendations, approve the revisions to the SPD, feedback from the consultation. If we add the, or if we recommendation to propose adoption to full council, pending updates discussed at this meeting, delegated to the head of planning and the chair of policy and resources.
Yeah.
Then enable the discussion to be reflected in the report to full council. Are we happy with that?
Yeah.
The new constitution changes, of course, says in discussion or in consultation with the head of PN.
Lewis,
The new consultation, the report I've had, you've recommended it to full council. There's nothing to say that full council will adopt it. So the constitution stays as it is for now, and until that change. But what I think this recommendation is doing is actually saying not that there's vast changes, but the changes reflect the discussion that's happened here tonight. So it's very easy to track back if there's something vastly different.
so I proposed a seconder. Councillor Bonnie, those in favour, please indicate. Those against, and abstentions. Okay, that's been agreed. Agenda item 7.
You're on not get the opportunity to speak when I indicate that I wanted to.
I didn't see, I did, you did, I wrote it down, didn't I? Sorry, Councillor Horton.
Not only did I saw you write it down.
Yes, so then I'll turn the pages over. Councillor Horton, please do so.
I'll register that I don't agree with your recommendation.
Okay then.
Okay, if you'll allow me to explain why. I'm a little anxious, and I agree that this is a really good document. It's got a great deal of work in it. I think it's interesting there are mixed responses about what a town centre should be, and I don't think this document defines the thinking on that. I don't think it is quite complete, and I think the discussion we've had here tonight actually reinforces my concern that it isn't complete, because we haven't been through a formal transportation and infrastructure, whatever it's called, planning and transportation discussion. There are a significant number of little things wrong with it, and we are kind of doing it on the hoof, and I'm uncomfortable with that. But for me, there's a couple of fundamental things which haven't been, I can't find the answer to. I can't find any evidence to support that the town centre can sustain 850 homes within the document, and I can't find a response to the concerns by KCC and the National Highways. They are clear that this could not be delivered without significant mitigations, and we haven't responded to those concerns. And I think it would be prudent to do so. I have one tiny issue on the report itself. At section 6, which is big page 15, primary disorder, we make a rather bold statement, I think, that more people within the town centre assist with crime prevention. And I'm not entirely sure that that's something that we could evidence as being a reasonable assessment of the potential for crime and disorder for our 850 homes delivered in the town centre. So I think that's a little bit of a concern. For me, there's a clear message which has come through tonight that this is almost there. We, I think, are rushing it right at the last minute, and I wouldn't want to spoil it for a hope of the car. And I think if we put it back through the proper committee and brought it to the next full council, we would be bringing back a complete document. Those are the basis of my objections. You've had your vote. I've declined it.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Agenda item 7 is the forward decision plan. Melissa, would you like to introduce this one?
So under the committee system, there is no requirement to have a full decisions list. The full decisions list is a legal framework that comes with the cabinet system. However, where the constitutional working group, when they discussed this, thought there would be benefit in members having an understanding of what is likely to be coming forward, and members also having the opportunity to say, or have you thought about this item or that item? It is up to the chair to set the agenda, so any suggestions or amendments for this would be considered by the chair at the agenda setting meeting, but this gives an idea of the current workload that is coming forward.
We have an update. That's not part of the Councillor Henderson.
Yeah, a very simple question. We have the updated version that goes forward for about 4 or 5 months. If we receive this tonight, up till what point can somebody suggest something new on a particular agenda?
It partly depends on the complexity of it, but Melissa, any particular guidelines?
Any report can be added up until the deadline for publishing reports. We would beg the chair that doesn't happen in that way. We have agenda setting meetings with the chair and the opposition councillor, lead opposition councillor, which is probably when items would be added by that cut-off period. What I would say though is within the constitution there is an allowance for an emergency item which can come after the agenda has been published, and this committee, being the Policy and Resources Committee, is the committee that is most likely to have some of that urgent item.
But under normal circumstances, that pre-meeting would be what? 4 weeks ahead of the PNR? Or?
Yes,
yeah.
But again, it is the only person that can The only person that can agree what goes on any of these agendas is the chair.
Oh,
So
yes,
it can
no.
be raised before then, but it's
I
up to the
I
chair
understand that.
who may feel that the agenda is too full and propose it for another
Yeah,
meeting.
okay.
Lloyd, councillor Bowden.
Thank you, Chair. Just an observation and from previous experience, it's not intended to be, it's going to sound critical, but it's not intended to be. Obviously, this committee in the next few weeks and months is going to be looking at the budget. It comes here. With respect to the Chairman, that's not your decision, it's got to come here anyway, I understand. I'm sure, and I'm commenting is trying to help. Looking at the forward plan, we again have got the budget and fees and charges. All well and good for this, but again, I'm thinking further down the road when it eventually goes to full council, which, in my opinion, to have both on the same night, fees and charges and the budget. I know this we had the budget first and the fees and charges after, we had to switch that around. But I still think they should be done at different meetings, for the simple fact that if we change the fees and charge, that could have a knock-on effect with the budget, and therefore you would not be able to produce a balanced budget and could not agree on the budget night. I think it would be far more efficient and prudent to do what we have done in previous years, to have fees and charges come to this committee as a separate document and to full council before the budget, so we can square that circle, whatever you want to call it, in advance. We don't get ourselves down that one-way avenue and get something a dead end street. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bowden. I'm going to call Lisa in on that one. Before I do so, I'm just going to point out that I have some sympathy with your comments. Lisa?
Allow an opinion on whether I deal with it. In my experience before, and when I've always built a budget, they go hand in hand, and so they are part of the same document, they are part of the same decision-making process, and the fees and charges that are proposed as part of the budget report have got an income target linked to them, and so any changes to the fees and charges would be a proposed amendment to the budget. They are one and the same. Doing them, I have never experienced doing them separately before, and so to me it is one and the same process. The fees and charges underpin the budget decisions that we're making, and so they should all be considered in the round. My opinion.
I have some sympathy with what Councillor Bowden is saying and certain other things. I think this is something that does need some consideration, Larissa.
Just that from experience, I've been in a situation where at a very long budget council meeting, there was an amendment to the budget, and the only way that amendment to the budget could be paid for was by a proposal to put up a fee. And the issue was, if that fees and charges already been agreed, that stymied members' ability to say, we have the budget, actually, we would like to do X, the only way we can fund it is by putting Y charge up, so therefore they go in hand. The reason that we do them together is to give members that flexibility to say, likewise, we've looked, and when we all discussed it in full council, we don't want to raise that charge. So what we're proposing the amendment is, we're going to cut that bit of service. It is because one is so interlinked to the other, that is why nationally they are done together.
But it does also mean, as Councillor Bowden said, that if we then want to change the fee and charges, it affects the budget.
Yes.
Yes, it does, but that's because the income and the expenditure.
Yeah.
So everybody could say, we don't want to put up fees and charges because that's the only thing we're looking at. There is no understanding then that actually by not putting, so I'm going to say, let's say that we're going to put up wedding fees. We don't want to put up, we don't do them, so we're not going to put up wedding fees because why should people pay more for weddings? And then actually people are saying, why are you cutting that service? But the decision on the fees has already been taken, so there is no correlation, and it's very difficult for members then, because people are saying, why, well, put the wedding fees up, and you can't do it. It ties your hands.
Very good. Thank you for that, both. my personal preference from the years I've been here, I think the last year, for me, was a better way of doing it. I think it gave a better overview discussion when they were separate. Otherwise, we are potentially going to have either a rushed through discussion of full council or an incredibly late night again. My other question is, again, still on the budgets, is how are we feeding in, and I mentioned this at the property and regeneration thing, all the committees, how are they going to feed into the budget setting process in terms of what the committees are looking to do in the forthcoming year? Because with intention, we don't know what everybody wants to do, and I can't see where that process is at the moment in terms of what are they going to send to us to feed into the budget for us to then recommend to full council.
Melissa?
Thank you.
The budget is an administration budget. The budget isn't a discussion with all the groups where they all work out what they want to do. It is on the night. It is not the chair of this committee says this is our budget. It is a single budget. The chairs of the individual committees can take with the meetings they have standings from their committee. They don't have to, but they can do, to say actually this is the piece of work we want to do. That feeds in, if the chair decides, that feeds into the administration's overall budget. The budget comes here for permission to consult. It doesn't come here to say, do you agree with the budget? It says for permission to consult. The budget then comes here again, not to say, do you agree? Do you recommend the budget to full council? And again, in history, in experience, what normally happens is that's a very quiet meeting where everyone goes, yes, mine. And most people abstain, and you know, the officers go, yay, it's a great budget. But then it goes to council, and that's when the discussions happen. So if we took every little bit of the budget, actually, it's very difficult for that individual committee, because opposition members may think, well, that's a good bit, but actually on budget night, that might not be so. So it is up to the administration of the council to set the budget, and it would be up to, so for example, if Councillor Simmons, as the Conservative lead on Environment Committee, felt very strongly that something should happen, that would form an amendment that you would put forward as your amendment to the budget, which would then get discussed and voted on. But it is not, the committee system does not enable lots of individual sections of a budget that's agreed at every level that clicks together. The budget process doesn't change from cabinet, and that's what it is. What you can do on anyone's individual committees is talk to your chair, which, as I've said before, committees encourage dialogue to say we really want this piece of work to go forward. And if you agree with your chair, that will then feed into a discussion with the administration to say, do we want to put this in the budget?
Got Mike Dendor, then Councillor Dendor, then Councillor Whiting, Councillor Bonney, and Councillor Horton.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I'm going to take it down a bit, but I'm just, it's a clarification really on procedural rules on the committee system. I'm interested. We talked about agenda setting, and now you've talked about powers of the chair in certain instances. If we, as the committee, decide we want something on the agenda, we propose it, second it, and agree it.
Then it goes on the agenda.
Right. So the chair's powers are simply to move it, maybe, from meeting to meeting, but not to get rid of it.
No, so there are two options open, and I'm sure you all know this. Either you request something on the agenda formally, propose it, second it, and vote on it, and if you have the numbers, it goes on the agenda. Alternatively, if you were to vote on it and it didn't, or you didn't think you had the numbers, or it didn't pass because you didn't have the numbers, then there is, if you feel it so passionately, there, if 25% of the committee think, then they can ask for an emergency meeting. I think it was 25%.
I thought it was four.
Four, yes. So 4 members. So, but what is if it's already been considered and rejected, I would suggest that the committee would probably not be best pleased, and you may not get the outcome you're hoping for if it is then pushed to a meeting. But that would be entirely up to members.
Thanks, Jim. And mine kind of follows on some of the discussion, and it's about the input. We had a very good, I thought, regional property meeting the other night. And one of the things that kept coming out of that was we only got a limited pot of money to do so much in terms of repairing buildings and repairing our estate. At what point in the process you described through you, the chief executive has described, at what process can that committee, those committee members, actually have a discussion about what it thinks is a reasonable sum in the budget to attack the red and the amber repairs that require various bits of the infrastructure that we own. And actually between November, December and then February, there's very little time. Right, so are you suggesting that we have offline discussions, this is a suggestion through you, Chair, that we have offline discussions with the relevant officers and then bring very late minute motions to full council? Or is it not better done via a discussion at committee to see, so that we can look at our budget and committee for repairs? I'll take that as one example, and then come back so that the officers aren't in a position to say we'd like to have done it, but we've got no money. Because actually we're the members and we can amend the way the money is allocated.
Melissa, can you clarify that?
So the difficulty with that is, in a very non-partisan way, all councillors would like to spend more money on more things. It isn't that one party doesn't want to spend, another party does. And we could end up with, we still end up with exactly the same situation, that an administration of councillors have to get the budget balanced. Otherwise, Lisa goes very wrong by one on everyone, and it's not pleasant. There is a third way, actually. You can talk to officers, and thank you, 47 of you can talk to us, we're open for that. But you can also talk amongst yourselves. You can say, actually, we think it should be this, we think it should be that. If you asked for an item to come on what the spend is, if the chair agreed it and we had the item and we provided the spend and you all said, actually, we think that needs to be double, that could get voted through. That doesn't mean that we double the spend. It means that that's your preference, but the process is still the same. We go through an administration budget. So that's the challenge. If you wish to discuss about individual budgets, then it is really something that you would need to either raise at agenda setting through your leader members' chat discussions, say, I think we need to talk about this. Or it is something that you can talk to officers about, but the place to amend the budget is Budget Council, and Budget Councils in lots of places last a very long time because those discussions are held in public, and it is difficult when we don't have any money. But just suggesting in one committee looking at something in isolation, your committee, so if we take a committee you're both on, it wouldn't think about, well, what might we have to do on Councillor Simmons and Councillor Saunders's committee, who might think, no, you will end up with many more things that we have money for. So, and then these meetings are public, so public expectation is that that's what we'll do, and then we can't, and that makes life very, very difficult. So the process that's run by all councils, committee or cabinet, is administration do the budget, and the discussions happen at Budget Council, where it is transparent and it is in public.
But I would say that if there are ideas, the opposition have got ideas, they can talk to the chairs or the other people on the committees and see if there is a wider interest in something like that.
If I can just cover, it's not an opposition thing, it's just a more wider thing. Part of the committee system was that we empowered backbenchers and we empowered members more to have a say, and a formal discussion about the budget that is involved by that particular committee with the chair of that committee, so that the chair of that committee can be informed in their discussion with the rest of the administration, would seem to make sense. But this forward plan doesn't actually allow time for that, really. And it would be nice perhaps if next year there was time built into the forward plan so that those discussions could take place in an open and transparent way. So thank you.
Councillor Bonny.
Yeah, thank you. It was really picking up the point that was made earlier about, having both fees and charges as well as the overall budget there. Is that any amendments need to be published, don't they, beforehand? And so fully costed and thought through, so we won't have on the night people going, oh, well, actually we'll put this up our fiver, because it's got to be thought through and the night's got to work, so, just to remind me of that, but I've got nothing else to say.
If I'm right, you can amend fees and charges separately.
So you can actually amend, so 2019 by the administration voted against the budget. So we had no budget, and what we did do amendments on the night, and that's when we did change fees and charges on the night. And it's what happened. We say not to do it because it has to be fully costed. That council has amended it and then it's moved on. But so it can do, fees and charges can be changed. The idea is, the difficulty for the council is that if the public come to one part of it, they don't understand why we're doing something because they can't see what it's being paid for. So
that might not be
yes,
something we want to do. Yeah. Councillor Norton.
Thank you, Chair. Coming back to the original point that was made, which was about the relationship between budget setting, the fees and charges and the final budget. I think we all suffered last year because we were used to something that had gone on here for years. The Section 151 officer came in with a different operating structure, and it was very late in the day that we recognised that, and it caused a lot of confusion. People inherently don't like change, but I think the explanation we were given at the beginning of this, which is actually fees and charges are inextricably linked with the overall budget, and if you want to change one, you have to push the bubble down somewhere else, is really, really clear. And to me, it makes absolute sense that we should do the two on the same night, but we need to understand that that's the process. And all of the members need to understand that that's the process. And I think that leads to a much better arrangement. And in reality, we got pretty close to that at the last budget because the opposition did have a view on fees and charges, and it did have an implication on the budget, and it did go to a vote and could have changed the budget. So I whilst I fully respect there was a way we've always done it, the way it was described here makes real sense, and I think it gives us clarity, but all of the members have got to know, and I think it's incumbent upon us to do something to explain it to all of the members. Thank you, Chair.
I apologise, I didn't realise that anyone did do it separately, which is why I didn't communicate that it would be done in one meeting my first go round, because I didn't know that it was done differently. So, as I said before, I've always taken them together, and so I didn't realise you were expecting them at two different meetings, so that's why I didn't communicate that very well.
Councillor Henderson.
I just wanted to pick up that the item on the agenda we're discussing is the forward plan for PNR. We have a constitution, we have a way of doing things. We've just made, or just recommended some minor changes to it, but the fact is we don't look, never have incidentally, at our budget on the basis of each department and or alternatively each committee. We do it as a total budget. As Larissa says, that budget is proposed by the administration and can be amended. So I simply say I'm not really sure what we're talking about here. It's not relevant to the item on the agenda.
It wasn't, but it was quite interesting. And it is useful to have these explained.
I want a clarification on that, if I may. When we used to have the scrutiny committee for the budget meeting, I used to invite, as everyone would know, all the cabinet members, as was, to come and present what they were suggesting for the budget in the forecast in that year. So it was at scrutiny where we did that, and I totally agree, we wouldn't want to do that on the budget even. But there was that element that was fed in by the cabinet member at the time of what they were going to do with the budget. So it did, you could replace the budget with a committee member or committee chair if you wanted to.
Okay, are we happy to vote the forward plan?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you. Agenda item 8 is the financial management report, first quarter monitoring, and it is Lisa.
Thank you. Yeah, so this is the forecast outturn report as at the end of June. So it is taking into account budget holders forecasted to spend to the end of March.
I'm just trying to attract the chair's attention.
Yeah, I was going to say, any questions? Councillor
We're
Crew.
when the finance officer's finished, so.
Go on, Lisa.
Thank you. I have to say that this monitoring went out during the water emergency, and the tight turnaround meant that I think that we can possibly expect a better attention to detail at the next round monitoring, which is going to be next week. The overspend is forecast to be just under £1 million. That is predominantly down to the position with homelessness that we find ourselves in at the moment. The detail of the current spend capital is also included, including 2 new projects that went to community committee on the 7th of September, one of which was actually proposed to go but was pulled, but the funding is still proposed in this report if the decision is then taken that that's not going to happen, we can take it out. So the Lindsay Church Hall and the Coach Park. And the final point on this report is around the business rates pool. The government have asked us for an indication of our position to remain in the pool or not by next week. So I'm asking the delegation to assess the position once we have got all of the county districts positions to see whether we should remain in or not.
Councillor Crew.
Thank you, Chair. Well, an overspend of nearly £1 million projected is quite striking. And it does give all members some indication of the gathering storm, because this is this year's budget and it's not going to get any easier as we go forward. As Lisa said, a large proportion of this is temporary accommodation. And the slightly alarming thing about that is this isn't just providing an extended service to more people. It's a large part of it is due to increasing rents in the private sector, and that is why we're in such a vulnerable position going forward. And it would be very easy to say, oh well, we'll cut this, but we can't hang out to dry the people who actually need the service, and we somehow or other we do need to find an alternative way of providing temporary accommodation without being so susceptible to the market in the private sector, because as we said, it's going to get worse. So that's the big thing, but actually the environment and leisure would be an overspend, wouldn't it? But for the quite considerable extra income coming from parking, which I always hoped would be the case. So that has actually got us out of jail to some extent, and hopefully that will continue to be the case. And of course, we're also saving, as I think we hoped would happen, we're saving on the fact that we're shared servicing with Kent, and that is saving some money. Maybe that will do so in future. So it's only to comment that all members need to be fully aware, just when we're talking about the budget, you need to be fully aware of just what a snake pit we could be entering towards. On the shared business area, just to say, it's really a bit of a no-brainer. Until circumstances change, we do well out of the pool, so why would we not want to keep on doing well out of it? But if circumstances do change, then quite likely the leader finance officer and distributor need to adapt to those changed circumstances. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Horton.
Thank you very much, Chair. I've got some questions and one what I hope is helpful observation. I'll run down the recommendations as a good place to start. Members, recommendation 2 is the members to agree to top up the pension and redundancy reserve by 100k. This is covered in the report at 311, but it doesn't say why we have to do that or why we think it's prudent to do that. So some explanation about why we think it's appropriate to do that at this moment in time would be helpful. The next one,
Have you got a lot?
I've got quite a few.
Okay, let's just get
Do you want to do them one at a time?
Yeah,
or
let's
do you
get
want
that
to
one
go through?
clarified.
Yes, because this reserve is generally a staffing reserve as well, so it's also used for consultancy support. And as you know, we have got a few interims around the senior positions at the moment, and so that was the reason for that.
Right, so isn't that something?
Well,
Yeah,
Councillor
I'm struggling. I mean, if we're actually saying we want £100,000 for consultancy or for staffing costs, why does it go into pensions and redundancy?
We don't have the pensions and redundancy as a pensions, redundancy and staffing reserve.
Right, we call it that in the report. It might be more helpful. The next one down, I've used some help understanding why at the end of the first quarter report it is considered appropriate for members to delegate authority to the Director of Resources for something which would take place at year end. I don't have a difficulty with the delegation per se, but why are we doing it off the back of the first quarter, and why is the committee not considering it later in the year and making that delegation?
Yeah, because I wanted to get the delegation done and dusted as soon as possible, so that come year end, I'm not then trying to struggle around for that then. I've realised the need for it now, and so I'm forward planning.
Okay, yeah, thank you. The next one is, it's linked to the recommendation 5, and I hope it's a helpful observation. It says to note 2 new capital projects, which are at 313. There are 2 capital projects there, and it says they've been approved, and I just think for this committee it would be really useful if something's been approved to state where that approval was done. I think one of these is a committee and the other one is a staff authority, but if that were in future reports just clarified, I think it would be really helpful.
I agree, yeah.
And then the final one, I agree wholeheartedly with Councillor Truelove. The exchange business rates pool has served Swale incredibly well. In fact, I think we're probably the authority which has done best out of it. It is an absolute no-brainer, but I do think there is an opportunity, and I'll just put it as an opportunity. Within the Constitution, there is the opportunity to propose an amendment to a recommendation if it's likely to get full support. And I think there's an opportunity here to include the Leader of the Opposition as someone that the Director of Resources consults. It's only a consultation in terms of a decision of this nature. I think that is a positive move toward the way that we would want to include people in the committee structure of the council. So I make the proposal that the consultation be with the leader and the leader of the opposition.
I'm quite happy with that as well. So if we're not voting on them yet, so when we vote on these, if people are okay with that amendment, we'll vote on that amendment number 6. Yeah.
I'm clearly happy with it.
Okay then. Councillor Whiting.
One was a question about the same fund. There's no, I couldn't see, and please forgive me if I missed it. I couldn't actually see the amounts that we're talking about with the business rate fund.
On which one, sorry?
The business pool, business rate pool. I can't see any numbers in there. So that, because we talk in number 6, recommendation 6, we talk about significant changes. Well, if it's only £10 involved, then £5 will be significant. If it's 10 million, then £5 isn't. I've got no measure of how big this fund is and how big our share of it would be.
The business rates.
No.
Thank you, Chairman.
You did come stop me.
Lisa.
You might not tell me now.
Okay.
The business rates income is included in the net in the income section of total financing section of the budget table 1. So our business rate income for the company is £9 million.
Is about, sorry? 9.
So your 5 years.
No, it's not. And a second question, if I may, Chairman. It's on 3.4, page 113. I was just trying to make those figures add up, and there's an overspend in planning of 132, but it seems that there's additional incomes amounting to 381. So we got 381,000 more than we were expecting to get in, but we're 132 overspent. So it's quite.
381.
We're adding the 231 and the 150.
Well, we have
150 is anticipated.
Yes. So that was my confusion. There seem to be big numbers there of money coming in, yet we're still overspent. And I just wondered where that overspend had gone. Had it all gone, for example, on the advice that we've been, consultation advice? Because it would be a very large sum of money to have.
Flo, are you still with us?
No.
This question was coming.
Yeah, we don't list every single element of the project overspend, so the highlights are that there is income, additional income, but that offset by consultancy advice and loss of land charge income and the additional agency costs, which we haven't broken down the costs of.
So of that additional 381, if we take out the 132, there was actually 249. We spent more than 249,000 more than we were expecting to spend.
We had a working budget of £835,950. The projected outturn at the moment is £968,760. That means that the amount we have spent has been more than we had in the budget. The other figures are just information about things, about particular aspects of that, but they're not the full story.
So the total overspend is 132.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it would have been, okay.
That's what the reported one.
But if the £150,000 anticipated came in, there'd be an underspend of 18,000.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Simmons.
Oh, thank you, Chairman. Two questions. The first is under 3.5, the first bullet point. It's on page 113. It says that the projected overspend is 212,000 on refuse collection, including 229,900
indexation compensation payable to the contractor. I don't understand, is that 229,000? Is that in addition to what would have been in the budget as an indexation? And I just found that I was surprised that the overspend was only 212,000. If there was 229,000 indexation compensation.
Lisa?
Yeah, so there are some minor underspends across that budget. It's quite a large budget, but yes, I think you recall, I think we explained before that the point that we did the budget build, indexation was running at about 5%, and then by the time this came in, the indexation calculation was 12.9%. So we do have an in-year shortfall on inflation, which is what the indexation compensation phrase is. Yes, and so it would, if that was on its own, it would be 229,000, but there's also some minor underspends within the service that
I guess that's what it was. Thank you. And my second question is right on the last page, 120, on the capital program. Are we seriously going to spend £50,000 on IT equipment for the council chamber?
That's the work on the budget.
I'm astonished.
Yeah, go on.
Yes, I mean, this is at a point in time that was agreed that you were going to do some upgrades to the council chamber. The work obviously hasn't started on that yet, but it's in the capital programme, so we have to show it. And that, otherwise you'd be asking me why I've taken away your budget. So,
Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, I see no more hands. Can I move the recommendations 1 to 6 on that with the amendment that the item recommendation 6 is in consultation with the leader and the leader of the opposition?
Agreed.
Agreed. Agenda item 9. Right. Agenda item 9 is the list manager update. Lisa, it's got your name.
yes, it's Ali.
Yes. Stay over to Alison on this one.
Thank you, Chair. This is the committee's first risk update report, setting out the council's corporate risks, which is to say those risks that could have an effect on the achievement of the council's priorities. The council has 15 corporate risks, which is set out from page 127 of your report pack. And these risks have been reviewed and updated with risk owners to ensure that they're up to date and to rescore them using the new risk management framework, which was agreed by the Audit Committee in July. The most significant risks to the council are risks B, around reflecting the increasing demand from the cost of living crisis. Risk D, on the design of major contracts which have been affected by the current economic conditions. Risk A, on homelessness, which is also affected by the cost of living crisis. And risk C, on balancing the medium-term financial budget. Final thing I just wanted to note was that work is currently underway to review and update all of the council's operational risks and to rescore those using the new framework. So the next report to policy and resources will include information about the overall risk profile of the council, incorporating those as well. And members are asked to consider the council's corporate risks and how they're managed.
Okay. Councillor Barring.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, President Alison, for your session earlier. It could be a dry subject, but I'm not really enjoying things like that anyway. Got a couple of questions and observations. On the risk register about homelessness, as an example, it's in the score of 20 at the moment, which puts in the top of risk. But if we introduce the mitigating provisions, then that will drop down to 12. Great. But there's no timescale for how long those mitigation factors will actually take to come in. So it's 20 now. If we don't bring those mitigating factors in this year, next year, 5 years' time, however long it takes to actually do that, we're still sitting in the black for that period of time. How do we make sure that, do we put a time limit on mitigating factors? The other comment I'm going to make is, if, so the risk factors come to this committee. I understand that. But we have the risk owner as a councillor, or a member and a lead officer. That seems to suggest it wasn't going back to what the old system in terms of cabinet. Should the risk be better sitting with the committee? Should risks that pertain to a particular subject which sits to a committee be discussed by that committee? So housing should go to the housing committee rather than us as a whole group. And in which case, should it be the actual name taking homelessness because it's a special bed on there, but should it not be also in terms of ownership? In that case, should it not be, I'll say, either the committee or the chair of that committee, rather than the whole committee?
Okay.
Maybe.
We're taking that most questions apply to every item,
Yeah.
rather than just the first one. So can you take the first one on the time minutes? Because I imagine it's a simple practical, but
Yeah, so the risk management software that I referred to earlier in the training JCAD captures the timeline or the target dates for implementing those actions. And like you say, those actions, once they're complete, will bring that risk down. So I can include in future reports if members want more detail around the timescales for delivering those actions, so that information is there.
okay. Larissa, can you address the wider risk of the committee?
This committee has the overview of risk. So if it were to go to each individual committee, the same way as the budget, there is not that overview. However, each, as you know, each committee, as well as having a decision-making function, has a certain scrutiny function. So if there was a concern by members of that committee that there was an issue with a risk, then it would be completely legitimate for that committee to ask for more information. Just for the committee to get 3 lines, which is what in effect it is, wouldn't really give them enough. What the role of the committee would do, yours is the overview to say these are corporate risks. The committee would take a more in-depth view at actually how we are managing those mitigations. Are we doing what we need to do? So for housing, they might want more of a deep dive scrutiny into how we do mitigation. That could be the catalyst for that to be caused, but the overall risk responsibility lies with this. I think to have the chair of the committee is reasonable. You might choose to put chair of community or chair of housing committee, so you're very clear that's what it is, rather than a name, because that could, you know, for the whole.
Not for a lot of money unless it is.
Just because it says chair of policy and resources, it is still you. That's why we say, put the chief exec, don't put the rest of it, it is still me. But no, I'm with you on that. But so I think that would be, that this committee, it is really important that you have that, you stand back. And the problem with the service committee is not the problem, but the issue is sometimes we get very deep in and they're not stepping back going, well, actually, what about? And that's what the role of this committee is.
Could we have a little bit of clarity on how somebody would get something onto the committee? If they've seen this, so, I'd like, I think we need a little bit of the, looking deep dive into homelessness.
I would ask the committee chair, can we have a deep dive into homelessness or a deep dive into, and the reason is because it follows that. What then would happen is the officer would write a report setting out the parameters of what is going to be looked at. We don't just go and do it. We would say you want to look at X, Y, and Z. The committee would consider that and say, yes, but we need you to look at BW as well. And then the officer would go away and there would be and you may decide as part of that scrutiny, so for, I'm just going to, you know, if it was something, scrutiny on homelessness, you might say, what we want you to do is we want you to include citizens' advice in it, so we can know for the risk, if it's going to get worse, as Councillor Truelove said it could get worse, the committee may say, can we talk to citizens and citizens by Swale or Optiva or other people? That would be for the committee to decide.
Thank you. How do we get the committees to be aware of what the risk is? I get the screen is here, but I'm not a committee. We've property and regen. We've not seen this. How do the committees become aware of it? Because I mean, there will be some members who say, well, members should be looking at everything anyway. Fact is, they don't.
Groups can take it back. I mean, if you've got, say, well, yeah, I'm not on the homeless committee, but I'm reasonably something about members. I think this is something we need to look at, because I've seen it at PNR.
Okay. Well,
I've got David, sorry, Councillor Simmons, Councillor Dendor, and Councillor Horton.
Well, it's thank you, Chairman. It's more or less on the same subject, and I apologise I couldn't come to your briefing earlier. And is the corporate risk register an internal document or is it external? The reason I'm asking that question is I'm pretty sure that the old, under the old cabinet system, the risk register listed the cabinet member and the lead officer. And I'm just wondering if it's going to be like this, whether it is taking homelessness, it should say Councillor Ben Martin and Charlotte, so that if people look at this, then they know who the councillor is and who the officer is. We can take that away. Thank you.
Councillor Dendor.
Thanks, Chair. It's actually on the same frame in a way. Key existing controls, I'm just leading a few here. Now, these are controls as of now, yes?
Yeah,
It's littered with cabinet all the way through. It's mentioned on all, well, certainly the last three I'm looking at it. It's got cabinet members.
There's one.
So I think you need to review the wording there to get it down to committee chairman or I mean, I can refer on to you if you like. Since, focus on established priorities, which I think is the last one, isn't it? Regular cabinet meetings.
That's on key existing controls.
So,
It's on page 133, Mike. There's a chairman, sorry, there's a couple there.
yeah, there's a couple there.
Regular one-to-one meetings between cabinet members.
So that is our heads of service and directors, not Alison. She collates what we write. It is us that write it. So in Alison's defence, she is innocent, we is guilty, and we will sort it out way quicker than you think we would.
But wasn't this quarter one?
Sorry?
Wasn't this quarter one?
No, we have updated it since we took it. There is.
That's why I asked if it's
It is
existing at the moment.
You are sponsored, Councillor Dendor. Thanks. I thought it was just quarter one. Councillor Horton.
Thank you very much, Chair. I just want to focus in on risk. It's the first risk on page 131, cyber security incidents. We've got a whole bunch of pre-existing controls which look good. We've got an impact and a likelihood which scores 12, but we appear to have nothing further planned. That worries me because it could be interpreted as a statement that we accept the risk at the current level, or it could be that we've got no ideas. Either of those are disconcerting, particularly in an arena like cyber security, where keeping up with the curve is difficult at the best of times. So I would like to see something in there, and the interpretation that we are happy with our cyber security because we've got nothing further that we want to do, I think is really worrying, and I agree it's a very significant risk for the organisation. I just think there's something more we need to do with that.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Horton. I mean, obviously, there's also the focus on blacks and reds, get them down to ambers, and that would be, what we've been doing here. But if you feel that further controls should be considered. Who would like to take that, Melissa?
We will look at that and we will talk to, I know they are planning other stuff. And we're talking, because it's a Mid Kent, we're talking to the Mid Kent leaders about that in the coming weeks. And I think it hasn't been put on there because it hasn't been agreed with the leaders yet. So I think it's more of a, didn't want to predetermine the meeting with the leaders, which should have happened before this meeting, but it didn't because.
I will take a level of reassurance from that. Thank you very much.
The staff trace enterprise side of the immune system has been deployed.
Yes.
Councillor Bonham.
Yeah, so it's just on some of the existing controls and key existing controls planned. I think we're already doing it, it's just not mentioned. So certainly things like design of major contracts, we'd be getting legal advice, whether it's our own in-house team or whatever. I think it's about professional advice because we do it, it's just not in there. So I'm thinking, I know it's covered in Swell House refurbishment and that there's contractor meetings to monitor it. It would be the same that, you know, as contracts progress, we'd have legal advice, etc. And also on major contractor failure or decline, again, we would get professional advice in particular around insolvency, and I would think that would be a controls plan, that if there was a major contractor failure, that A, would have legal advice and B, would probably get insolvency advice.
Melissa agrees. Councillor Whiting.
Thanks, Chair. Mine's not so much about the process, because I'm adding again to the presentation we had earlier. Just a couple of questions about actually what the report is telling us, if I may. I'm a little surprised that risks H and G have moved less risky, given what we know about developers and the finances of house building and the local plan and where we are with all of that. So I am a little bit surprised that those two risks, H and G, have reduced, and I just want a comment on that would be good. And my only other one relates to risk I, and I'll find my piece of paper. It talks about risk I. On some services, but we've reduced the risk in this report. And it's reported as having a lower risk after mitigation than previously, but
Is that the framework change?
it may be. I don't know the answer, so I'm asking the question.
But
It suggests it's going to get worse. That's all.
it's gone from 12 down to 9.
Yeah, but the commentary, Chairman, with respect on page 128 says the position is potential for it to worsen. So I just wondered, there seemed to be a conflict there, that was all. I didn't understand it.
Okay.
And the H and G one reducing.
You're taking one at a time.
Thank
Not
you.
putting the 4 pages at the moment. First one, Melissa. Alison?
So I can answer the recruitment one. So the recruitment risk is a new risk that's been added onto the risk register recently. And like you say, so if we take the mitigating action, it should, all things being equal, reduce the risk. But there is the chance that, given the economic conditions and the environment that we're in, that risk won't necessarily be mitigated down to that. So it's a bit of a sort of balance between taking actions to try and reduce it, but potentially realising that those actions might have a lesser.
And that therefore would be one that you would want to review in 3
Yeah,
months,
absolutely.
for example, rather than 6. Thank you.
So the corporate risks, do get reviewed every 3 months, so they go to S&T quarterly, so they get reviewed routinely.
Next.
G and H, really. They're related in a way, Chairman, because one's to do with infrastructure and the other one's housing supply, both of which related inextricably, I would thought, with the local plan and market conditions as well, and affordability and everything else that goes with it.
So the way that the risk matrix works, it works on likelihood and impact. And we think that the housing market is challenging, housing supply is challenging, and that is the risk, and that is what it's got, and the impact is such. In the same way as we are with recruitment, we are putting in place mechanisms and mitigations, which means it should come down. We review these. We haven't seen evidence at the moment that those mitigations aren't working, but risk register is not something that you go, oh, that's fine. It might look like it with the words of cabinet members in it, but actually it's a living document. So when we look at it, we'll say, well, what's changed? So at the moment, as of today, we are comfortable that the likelihood and the impact isn't going to significantly change at the moment because of the mitigations we're putting in. When we look at it next time, it could change. That doesn't mean we've suddenly become rubbish. It means that there's something's happened that we say that mitigation's not working. What are we going to do? And for some things, we'll try lots of mitigation, and take the cost of living crisis. We can do so much, but actually, if the cost of living keeps going up, whatever we try, we're going to go, no, that doesn't work out. So it's that snapshot is at the moment we think it's so. We think it's still serious because G&H are both serious numbers, but we think it's not got to a higher level of mitigation of risk. What is most likely to change? It's less likely to have the first number, which is the current, and the mitigation one being higher. When we look at it again, what was like if it's got worse, that first number will change, and then that second number we'll say, what are we doing about it?
I cannot find the power infrastructure one. I would definitely seen it, but I can say on housing supply, the reason that the likelihood has dropped, you can see the controls that are planned, but we also are aware that we are delivering at a faster rate, and I think this will be coming to the next planning working group, because we actually delivered over 8,000 last year. So that obviously will have a.
Can I just make one other quick point? It's a request for next time, whether the pages that contain the risk and the mitigations and the other, could we just number each risk?
I think that's a very good idea.
And put them so that we're not saying the third one up on page 6. And also, if we could do that, and put them in order, a bit like we did earlier with the amendment we made to the Constitution, actually put those bullet points in some sort of sensible order so that they were by department, if you like. So if there's more than
these are by urgency.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we'll give them a number of these.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, I think I've asked everybody. So the agenda recommendation is to consider the council's corporate lists, gaining assurance that key lists have been appropriately managed, and note that we have questions about cyber security. Okay, I'm happy to propose that. Any seconder? Derek. Those in favour? Excellent. That's it, isn't it? Thank you all very much. I got that far. I got that far.
You're obviously pale, so I
know, I'm trying, I said I'd find my 9, but 8 was a bit much, wasn't it?